and welcome to another edition of the Big Orange Podcast, the A to Z Sports Big Orange Podcast. That's the full name. I'm Charlie Burris, here as always with my co-host and A to Z Sports writer, Zach Ragan. Wherever you listen throughout the world, we thank you so much for listening to us. Zach and I talk everything balls every week here on the Big Orange Podcast. And if you want to listen to it on the reg, make sure you go over to the A to Z Sports Podcast Network feed, Spotify, Apple, and subscribe. And then you won't miss an episode when they drop it. And if you want to see video, which in the last few weeks we've had some nice visual elements, like the background behind me with our perpetual guest, Vern Lundquist, go to the A to Z Sports YouTube and subscribe there too. And you'll get all of the content that they have there because they have YouTube-specific stuff, all the other shows on A to Z. At Charlie_Burris, at Zach TNT, at A to Z Sports, Facebook.com/A to Z Sports Nashville on the old social medias, and A to Z Sports.com for everything that Zach and I and everybody over there writes. Well, Zach, we had a week where we got to celebrate an SEC championship. First time 43 years, right? That was fun. A completed shooting star, it seems. But we did. I know I at least cherished it because it came crashing down, as all things do with Tennessee sports, it seems. We talked. The Vols were the best team until the Sweet 16 in their quadrant of the bracket. We weren't sure about Villanova. I still believe that to be the case. But they lose to Michigan. Am I going to throw up live on this podcast right now? They lose to Michigan, and Juwan Howard and this tall kid who dunked all over us, and the point guard that throws up this freak hook shot, and this it's every time, Zach. It's every time. Why, God? Why must it be like this? We said on the show last week that all we wanted was to come on here and just be like, Tennessee, you just took care of business. Straight to the Sweet 16, then it gets really tough. Then it's Villanova. Hey, if you lose to Villanova, Villanova's a great basketball team. Michigan? I mean, let's get into it, Zach. How you doing? How we doing?
I wrote a column about Rick Barnes this morning, and it kind of brought everything from Saturday night back to the surface. So I quickly had to go read an article about Urban Meyer and how terrible he was in Jacksonville. It was full of great stories on The Athletic, and I kind of got my mind off of it for a little bit, got a good laugh out of it, but nothing can kind of really wash away what happened Saturday night. And a few weeks ago on the podcast, before the SEC tournament, I said that if Tennessee wins the SEC tournament, that it doesn't matter what happens after. Even if they lose in the first round of the NCAA tournament, the season, it would be a great season. And now that it's happened, and they lost in the opening weekend, not the first round, but the second round, I was wrong. That it doesn't make it any better. It really doesn't. And I think I said that because I didn't think that this was going to happen. Like, I really believed that this team was going to go to at least the Sweet 16. And I thought it had a legitimate Final Four, shot. Like, they were good enough to make the Final Four. And we all know that. A lot of people know that. It's another Rick Barnes early exit. Nine out of his last 10 NCAA tournament appearances, he has not made it out of the opening weekend. That dates back to his time at Texas, and that's a very sobering stat.
It sucks. It makes me. I said this on Twitter. This was my primary thought after this game. It just makes me angry. Because, yeah, I was with you. And this is still true to a certain extent. The joy of that SEC championship is not gone. That is still an amazing thing. First time in 43 years. You can't take that away. It's a banner that'll hang in the rafters, and that's incredible. We talked all about it last week. You're not going to take that away from me. You got all of that over on every other SEC team, all of your in-conference rivals. You won the SEC championship. That happened, and you can't take that away, and that's amazing. You can't take that away from Rick Barnes either, and I think that point needs to be made. He did do something that he had not done since 1994, and something he's only done twice in his entire career. He won the Big East back then with Providence, won the SEC this year with Tennessee. You can't take it away. But what makes me angry is that now, like, as I said, if you had got to the Sweet 16 and you lose to Villanova, you go, Villanova's a really great basketball team with one of the best coaches in all of college basketball, a guy who has won 2 national championships in the last 10 years. Just a guy who will eventually be a living legend in Jay Wright, if he's not already. Like, that's okay, fine. You lost to Villanova. They're also a higher seed, a 3 losing to a 2, whatever. Michigan, I will say this. Perhaps we did not give Michigan its due. They are extremely talented, and we should have mentioned this on the show last week more. They are packed with players. They actually had a higher recruiting class last year than Tennessee did, but their players did not pan out like Tennessee's recruits did. Their guys did not turn out like Kennedy, Chandler. They've only won 17 games. I still kind of stick by this despite how they're playing. They did not deserve to be in the NCAA tournament. They did not. There were teams, Texas A&M won 23 games and didn't get in. And they won 17 and got in. It's absurd. But it is a good team that's packed with talent. There is that element that almost nobody gave them that due going in because Tennessee had just been playing so well. With that said, though, Tennessee was still, and you saw it in the game, Tennessee was still the better team. You had more talent, or you had players who were playing their best basketball at more positions than Michigan had. They had you completely beat at the 5. That big man just destroyed Tennessee. Is what it is. But at every other position, you were right there with him, and at most positions better. And you couldn't make shots. They missed wide open shots they had been making for weeks. For weeks. Wide open threes that Zakai Siegler had been making, he bricks them. That Kennedy Chandler had been making, he bricks them. That Josiah Jordan James had been making, and he bricks them. And it just is too Tennessee, and it's too frankly, the discussion that sucks here is it's too Rick Barnes. I wanted him so badly, so badly to shed this whole thing so that we don't have to have this conversation. And I know there's people that are going to listen to this and go, well, just don't have the conversation. No, that's not how this works. You do have to talk about it. You have to talk about the reality on the ground. Yes, Rick got over a hurdle with the SEC championship game. Again, you can't take that away. But you have to look at the reality on the ground. The guy, whatever it is in March, you look at this game, and I guess I do walk away with this particular game sympathetic to Rick Barnes because his team, I think he came in coaching with the expectation that his team would make the shots that they had been making. That was the strategy that they took. They didn't really change up the game that they had been playing. And Michigan went out and beat Tennessee at its own game. Making shots when it mattered. They just made more plays than you did. And I don't necessarily blame Rick for coming in with the strategy that had been working. I'm not going to blame him for that. If the strategy hadn't been working and he comes in trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, so to speak, that's one thing. But this has been working. You just won the SEC championship. This has been working. You beat Kentucky in a dominant way. You beat Kentucky, and you walk away and you go, this strategy is working. Just go out and do the same. Enforce your will. And then if you play a team that's clearly better than you, then we can talk about, trying to do something different. The shots did not fall. So with all of that said, I will say to a certain extent, I'm sympathetic to Rick Barnes here. I know that's going to shock people because everybody thinks I'm the fire everybody guy. I've never said to fire Rick Barnes. I've never said to fire Rick Barnes. Let's get that out of the way. And I absolutely will not do it here. You just won an SEC championship. What are you talking about? Who's talking about firing Rick Barnes after you won an SEC championship? That's ridiculous. It's stupid that I have to say that. But I'm sympathetic to him here. I do think the strategy has been working. And then the shots, they hit the rim at a different angle than they were hitting before. And it makes me ill because of that, because the strategy that had been working just had an off night. You have to mention that Rick, is he cursed? I don't think so. But his history in March is horrific, might be strong, but it's not good. His history in March is not good. He went out in the second round with Kevin Durant. And you can't run away from that. You can't. It is what it is. It's part of this conversation, unfortunately. I mean, where do you go from here? I don't know. I hate it. Like I said, it makes me so angry, man.
Yeah. I think the one thing about your talking about the strategy working, you're right. It has been working. It worked in the SEC tournament. It worked last month. It worked against Longwood. I mean, what they hit like 14 threes against Longwood.
Yeah.
But there were times this season that we saw this Tennessee team. I mean, it's not like this came out of nowhere. So you kind of wonder, like, did Barnes bank on that just a little too much? Because, we have seen this before. You got to kind of expect it's going to come back around. I mean, it's not like that part of the team just went away or that they've put that all behind them. Clearly they haven't. I don't know. It felt like there's something about playing in the NCAA tournament. You have to adjust. It's a different style of game. It's a completely different game. And you see a coach like Michigan State's Tom Izzo. Like, how many times have we seen Michigan State be like a 4 seed or a 5 seed, and they're like in the Final Four? That didn't happen this year. They lost to Duke on Sunday. But we've seen it a lot where these Michigan State teams weren't that great during the regular season, and then all of a sudden they show up in the tournament and they're in the Final Four. And it's like Barnes is the opposite of that. I mean, you've seen it on Twitter and social media, regular season Rick. I mean, that he deserves that at this point. There's no argument against it.
There's a reason that I mentioned it before. There's a reason Jay Wright has 2 national championships. There's a reason that Krzyzewski, as much as I want that guy to lose and get his comeuppance, there's a reason that he has his national championships. And we'll get into that in just a second, because Zach, we do have, thankfully, here's something that I'll say. You know what helps take the pain of a terrible Tennessee loss? Food. You can drown your sorrows. Is that bad to say? Good food.
That's true.
Good food is good for the soul. And thankfully, in this time of sorrow, the good folks at HelloFresh are coming through for us. They're sponsoring the show yet again this week. Thank you to HelloFresh. They are awesome. And they are helping us out with promo code VOLS16. You can get 16 free meals. HelloFresh delivers pre-portioned ingredients to your door, including farm fresh produce that arrives within a week. So you get convenience without skimping on quality. You can skip that trip to the grocery store, saving you the wait in long lines and ensuring you don't waste money on any excess food. Give us a little more on HelloFresh, Zach.
Yeah, it was a tremendous help during the NCAA tournament and really just in general. We both work from home. You think it's always easy. You work from home, you just cook food whenever you want to. But the days get hectic. Before you know it, it's 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You've made no plans for any food. You've got to then kind of run to the grocery store, put a plan together, figure out what you're going to do. HelloFresh eliminates that. I mean, they have recipes that can be done in 20 minutes. I had a nice Italian herby pan seared chicken that was tremendous, ready in 20 minutes or so. Didn't have to stress about what I was going to do for dinner. Didn't have to really take my attention away from the NCAA tournament, or if you're still working. It's a great option. Everybody's busy, whether you're in the office, you got to run home and figure out dinner, or if you're already at home, like I said, HelloFresh pretty much has you covered for whatever you need.
Yeah, so HelloFresh sent us meals as a part of this, and again, thank you to them. Incredibly generous for them helping out the show. I made a sweet. Let me make sure I get this right. Sweet chili pork and cabbage stir fry. I kid you not. It sounds like it's similar to your meal. 20 minutes. You throw it together. They send it in this awesome little pre-portioned way that it's all there for you. You don't have to go through all the aisles of the grocery store. Oh, I got to find this and that, and then I got to get the teaspoon thing out, put the what, you don't have to do any of that stuff in 20 minutes, and it was awesome. It was this really, really great meal. I was truly impressed. The thing is, with this promo, Vols16, you can get 16 free meals and 3 free gifts. I mean, what more do we need to say? Again, do you need to drown your sorrows about Tennessee sports? Hopefully soon. Baseball looks pretty good. Hopefully this passes. This too shall pass. But while we are still mourning HelloFresh meals, you don't want to. You're down. Tennessee punched you in the gut yet again. You don't want to spend all of that time doing the grocery store and the blah, blah, blah. Vols16 at HelloFresh.com. Let me make sure that I get all of this right. HelloFresh.com/Vols16. VOLS16. Use code Vols16. Up to 16 free meals, 3 free gifts. HelloFresh.com. HelloFresh is America's #1 meal kit. Thank you to them for helping out the show, taking a little bit of the sting.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Sports.
Perfect time of year to get started with HelloFresh too. Spring is officially started. People's lives get busier and busier. You got kids, you got practices to get to. I know that's my life half the time, and this just makes your weeks a whole lot easier.
It really does. I was very, very impressed with the stuff that they sent us. It was great. Can't suggest that enough. Now, as I teased there, did I tease it? I mean, I think folks know where this is going, but I'll say it again. There's a reason that Jay Wright has 2 national championships. There's a reason that Kay has his national championships. However, I don't remember off the top of my head how many it is. There's a reason that some guys, there's a reason that Eric Musselman in 3 years has more NCAA tournament wins than Rick Barnes has in 7 at Tennessee. That's a tough stat to swallow, man. Oh my gosh. In 3 years, Eric Musselman in Arkansas has more NCAA tournament wins. Mike White at Florida made an Elite 8 and got fired from Florida. Now, Mike, somebody said, I mentioned this on Twitter, and somebody came back and said, well, do you want Mike White as the coach? Stop it. You know that that's not what this means when we talk about this. It's the pain of the fact that who is, in my opinion, an inferior coach has more NCAA tournament wins than Rick Barnes does. What's the deal? What's the deal there? As I said, is he cursed? I personally do not think so. And despite the fact that I am, to whatever extent, sympathetic to him in this particular case, where I do think he leaned on a strategy that had been working, and ultimately that ended up being a mistake. Although I would put it this way, I would have done the same. I mean, you go out and you shoot 110% from the floor against Longwood, you probably think you're going to make some shots against Michigan. And to Michigan's credit, we should say this, to Michigan's credit, they played great defense. They did play great defense. They came in with a great strategy. Credit to Juwan Howard. He came in and pressed the issue with Tennessee, and he really stuck it to him. Tennessee should have been able to fight through. They had, this is the thing, had the open shots at the end. That's why that sort of excuse like, oh, Michigan played great defense. They did. You had the shots at the end. Wide open. You had the shots at the end. And Scovey was so off that whole game. They just couldn't spring him open, and just it wasn't working. And that's credit to Michigan. You just couldn't spring Vescovy open. But It's the couple of Zakai threes. I mean, you hit those, you win that game probably. I don't even say probably. I think you do. You probably win it on free throws at the end by 6 or 7 if he hits those threes. And that it's brutal, but it's the truth. And blame whoever you want to. As I said, I'm not going to in this particular game. I'm not going to just go, it's all Rick. This is on his shoulders. He needs to take the fall. I don't really feel that way this time. But you do have to talk about, why does he lose in March like this? Why? It's, man, it sucks.
I think if and I think most would agree with this. If this game was just like in a vacuum, you're not looking at anything else. Nobody's really talking about Rick Barnes. You're talking about the missed shots. You're talking about Vescovi not really playing that well. Really, nobody except Kennedy Chandler played that well. That's the major talking points from this game. But when you put it all in perspective and you look at the whole body of work, you can't put an asterisk by this game when you look at Rick Barnes' tournament resume. I mean, it is what it is, and it follows the pattern that we've been talking about for the past several years. I mean, we've been doing this podcast for over 2 years now, and we've had this conversation about Rick Barnes in the tournament multiple times, and he just continues to prove that he's not an NCAA tournament coach. Regardless of how that particular game turned out or how other games have turned out, the results have been the same. I mean, who wants to hear excuses? That doesn't really make you feel any better. And then when you see these other coaches, like you mentioned, Eric Musselman and even Mike White advancing in the tournament, or some of the teams that have advanced to the Sweet 16 this week. I mean, St. Peter's is in the Sweet 16 as a 15 seed. It's when I wrote a column this morning about Barnes, it is a very strange place for Tennessee basketball to be in, because I believe two things to be true. I believe that Rick Barnes is a Hall of Fame coach. I believe he's been great for Tennessee. I believe the program is in a better place than it was under Bruce Pearl, obviously, because they've won an SEC tournament championship. He's played clean. There's no NCAA issues. He has a great reputation. People love Rick Barnes. There's no shady stuff going on behind the scenes. And it's a perennial NCAA tournament team, except for his first, year and the COVID year when they probably weren't going to make it. I mean, this has been a locked-in tournament team pretty much, and that is not something that Tennessee was under Conzo Martin necessarily, and even Bruce Pearl. I think his last year, did they missed the tournament or went out early? I can't remember exactly, but it was kind of fizzling out towards the end of Pearl's tenure as well. So I think that the team's in a great place, but I also think that has been the ceiling for this team. The NCAA tournament appearance. That's it. Anything that happens from there is just a miracle run at this point. And there's no evidence to suggest that will ever change. And I've already seen plenty of Facebook comments on what I wrote this morning that disagrees that that's the ceiling for the program. And I just don't see how you can disagree with that. I mean, unless they just go on this miracle run that you get a transcendent Anthony Davis type player to come in and play for a year that can just carry the team literally on his shoulders to a Final Four appearance that is that dominant. And even then, we don't know that Rick Barnes can do it because he had that guy in Kevin Durant and couldn't do it. But that's really the only thing that's going to get this team to a Final Four. Until I see otherwise, there's no reason to believe that the ceiling is any higher than what we've seen the past few years.
It's tough. I mean, the argument really is with Rick at this point. Is he? I think this is easy to say. He's the best basketball coach Tennessee has had in the modern era. And I guess what I mean by that would be since the 3-point line was instituted, maybe, which I think was 1981.
Late 70s,
80?
early 80s, somewhere in there.
I believe it was after Tennessee won its last SEC championship game.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to look it up to be sure.
I'm pretty sure I remember that famous Michael Jordan shot there in '82. There being no 3-point line. So
yeah. I mean, it was later. And so of the modern, he did. Bruce Cook. He won an SEC championship at Tennessee, and that takes him over the top there. Yeah, Bruce made an Elite Eight, but in the long run, what exactly does an Elite Eight mean? I mean, it's not a Final Four. Final Four, you're You're there on the floor where a national championship will be won. And an Elite Eight, you're a full step back from that. You don't get to cut down the nets by making it to an Elite Eight. You do by winning an Elite Eight game, and Bruce did not do that. And Rick in the NCAA tournament, he got to a Sweet 16. And so he is the best coach that Tennessee has had in the modern era. And maybe ever. I think there's an argument to be made there also, but nonetheless, you take that into account. And yeah, as you're saying there, you also have to say he just has this really tough history of just not getting it done in March. And that's why that SEC championship was so truly shocking, and why I said last week I felt like I couldn't have been more lucky as a Tennessee fan, because I really felt like I think most people know I'm a little cynical in my takes. I felt like it probably wasn't ever going to happen. I didn't with Rick. I didn't think that he could do that, and he did, and he got over that. And I said, this is a new era for Rick. He won in March. I mean, that's a postseason tournament. And then we're kind of right back to the mean. Suddenly, within a week, we're right back to, okay, yeah, never mind. He didn't really get that off his back. He didn't get that monkey off his back. And you just have to take it in totality. Unfortunately, you have to take the good with the bad. Your regular seasons are going to be great, and your postseasons with Rick are going to be a complete toss-up. You're gonna clearly he does well in the SEC tournament. I don't know what the difference is. There is so much to break down in terms of what happens in postseason basketball. Obviously, X's and O's on the floor is one thing, and I'm personally of the opinion Rick is not bad at X's O's. Certainly not. It is also not his strength. And you can dive into psychology. It gets real dorky real fast when it comes to this stuff. The psychology of, like, does the coach get tight? And then that translates to his players. And really, you're kind of, at that point, you're trying to get into Rick's head and assigning intent where you can't really prove it. And I don't like having that conversation, because just points on it are essentially unfalsifiable. Like, I can't prove one way or another that Rick gets really tight and his players feel that. That may be the case. I don't know. I'm not in those huddles, and I'm not in Rick's head. There's just so much that goes into all of that. Is that his problem? Is it purely just X's and O's and he just gets out coached? I do think in this scenario, you can say it flat out. He got out coached by Juwan Howard. But again, that doesn't mean to me that this was all Rick's fault. I hope that makes sense. He got out coached, but it's not all Rick's fault, because Rick put a strategy on the floor that had been working extremely well. Again, I probably would have done the exact same, because you were making those shots, and you're just, as a coach, you're just going to have to trust your guys and go, you made these for weeks and weeks on end now. Go out and make them again. Just let's do the same thing and make it happen. And Juwan Howard, to his credit, did a great job and coached. And I didn't think he would, because Juwan Howard has not necessarily proved to be a great coach up to this point. So far, he puts really good talent on the floor, but he's not proved to be a great coach. And he brought it, and it's really, really unfortunate. I
think there's something to the psychological aspect that you mentioned, because
I think there is.
Really, you look at teams that win championships. I mean, it always seems at some point in the tournament, there's just a tough, grinded out game that like Arizona Sunday night, they go to overtime against TCU. They pull that out. They could go and win blowout games and get to the Final Four from here. It always seems like there's just that one game that you just have to kind of throw the game plan out the window and really get inside your players' heads and give them the motivation, whatever it is that they need to get through that game. Like, you're going to have games like that. You're going to play 6 games to win a national championship. You're bound to have an off night, and maybe that has been Barnes' problem. He just doesn't know how to win those types of games. And maybe if he could just get through one of those really tough games, like the ones that, we've seen them lose. They've been close games that have knocked Tennessee out for the most part. The Purdue game in the Sweet 16. I mean, those are games that Tennessee could have won. It's not like they were just blown out of the building. I think that might be part of the problem. But I was talking about them being in a weird spot is Well, you're not going to force Rick Barnes into retirement because of this loss. I mean, that would be
No.
silly, and
Yeah.
nobody's suggesting that because look, there's no obvious answer out there. This isn't like football where we were texting over the weekend about like Rick Barnes is kind of like in that Mark Richt territory at Georgia, where he's really good in the regular season, but he just can't quite get over the hump. And then they bring Kirby Smart in, and Kirby gets them over the hump. He recruits at a higher level. Team plays with a lot more intensity, it seems like, under Kirby Smart. They win a national championship within a few years. They were in a national championship in 2 years. Well, in basketball, that guy is not out there for Tennessee to hire, at least not reasonably. I mean, maybe you say, hey, maybe they can go steal Scott Drew from Baylor by just offering him a blank check. Well, he's at home right now, too, and he just lost to a number 8 seed. Can you imagine if Tennessee was in that situation?
I mean, until last year, I don't know.
Yeah.
I know a lot of Tennessee fans aren't college basketball junkies and might not know this. Until last year, that was Scott Drew's reputation, is that he was a blow it in March guy. I mean, he would put these excellent Baylor teams on the floor, and then when it came down to crunch time, he couldn't do it.
And maybe if Rick Barnes was like 45 years old, but he's about to be 68 years old, you're not banking on some sudden improvement. Like, he's got decades of this. But if you push him out, you're going to go down the same road probably that Texas went down when they hired Shaka Smart, when they thought that Shaka Smart was going to get them over the hump. And they never even, I don't even think he made it out of the first round of an NCAA tournament when he was there. So that's the other side. I mean, that's where Tennessee could easily go. You go hire one of these upside coaches like was it McMahon at Murray State, who has Tennessee connections. He played at Tennessee, right? Under Buzz Peterson. Am I thinking correctly?
That sounds right.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd have to
that would be like a guy on the radar. You know, he's done
there.
well at Murray State. He recruited Ja Morant, but there's no guarantee that he's going to come to Tennessee and like suddenly be able to take the program over the hump. Everybody thought Shaka Smart was a sure thing at Texas, and he definitely wasn't. So that's why I think Tennessee fans, they need to appreciate what Rick Barnes has done and is doing at Tennessee, because Tennessee basketball is in a really good place.
He worked with Buzz Peterson.
Okay.
But didn't play for him.
Okay.
That's why I was like, I don't think so.
Yeah, but like there's
he worked for him.
Yeah. So you always look for somebody with a connection, and I've seen his name pop up in various coaching teams that need coaches right now. But I mean, that's the type of guy that you would have to hire.
Yes,
probably
that would be the sort of dude.
And there's just no sure thing. Like, it's such a gamble, and I don't think it's worth the risk to try to push Barnes out and go down the road you went down with Philip Fulmer, where you kind of make this strained relationship between a coach that's been really good for Tennessee. I mean, he's a great ambassador of Tennessee athletics. He's a great person. And with what he's done at Tennessee, like you said, he might be the best coach ever in program history. He deserves to go out however he wants to go out. And as long as this team is still making the tournament every year, I believe that to be the case, regardless of what happens in the tournament. So you can be frustrated, but you can also appreciate Barnes at the same time. It's a very strange mindset.
Yeah, I fully agree with everything that you said there. I mean, the move is not to be like, we have to find a guy that will get us over that hump. I mean, yeah, who's it gonna be? Provably, in college basketball, there are more coaches than college football. College football is just such a small set of guys who win those national championships and are those dudes. College basketball, there is more of them, but they are extremely few and far between.
Well, most of them have the same resume as Rick Barnes, if we're being honest. Like we talked about with Scott Drew until one particular season.
It's really a great example. And I also like that comparison to Mark Richt, where you go, this is good. It just isn't the best it could be. And so you don't want to get too down on it, even though the painful stuff like what just happened happens. And there's just no, you're not going to go and find the next Krzyzewski. That's a
luck. That's a blind luck type hire. Like, there are very few. UNC hired Roy Williams after he'd had decades of success at Kansas, and everybody knew that that was going to be his landing spot one day. Like those type of situations, just they're very so rare. Like they hardly ever happen, and there's nothing like that on Tennessee's radar. You just got to get really lucky, pretty much.
That really is it. There is no just typecast like that's the guy who can do that. You're not gonna go get Tony Bennett from Virginia. You're not gonna go get Jay Wright from Villanova. Like they're not leaving to come take this job. And so
I mean, look at the last coach that was like before Barnes, and that just worked out perfect because Texas had just fired him. He had some connections to Tennessee. He's kind of from the area. I mean, they lucked into that hire. But Donnie Tyndall before that, I mean, that wasn't a name that was on most fans' radars. Like that wasn't like a big name that like, oh yeah. I mean, you kind of talked yourself into it. And you know, it's like, okay, it's decent. It's solid, but it wasn't a sure thing at all. And we saw how that turned out.
But with all of that being said, that you do have to look at the situation and be grateful for how good Barnes has been, I think.
Yeah.
And the move is not some drastic, like we got to find a guy that can win in March.
Like you can criticize him without wanting him fired.
Exactly. It's just a two things can be true at once kind of conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It's you want to have the hot take and be like, he sucks, he's great. I mean, I also don't like when people are like, well, we've never made a Final Four, so we should just be happy that Tennessee. No, what? You had Kennedy Chandler, Josiah Jordan-James playing the best ball he's ever played. You had guys like Uros Plavšić coming into their own, playing great ball. This was a Final Four team. This was a team that you put them, you could put them at all of the different, 3 spots in that tournament, and you're going to get different outcomes. Like depending on the draw that you have, this team was good enough to beat most of the teams in the NCAA tournament, if not all of them.
Well, yeah, you beat Arizona. That
exactly
says it all.
There's no, oh, well, Tennessee's never made a Final Four, so we just need to. What? No, this team was good enough to win a Final Four, and they didn't do that. That is true. Don't give me the we're never going to be that program. No, you're the program right now that could reach a Final Four if you put the pieces together. You just haven't put the pieces together. So I don't like that either, but I also don't like the extreme of, well, Barnes, it's March Barnes, and this guy, I wish we had somebody else, but at least he'll do. I don't like that either. It's just like most things, it just lies in the middle where you go, the regular seasons are really fun. Hey, we got an SEC championship, and that is absolutely incredible, and I'll be grateful for that and that experience that I had there for the rest of my life, frankly. I said it last week. That's the best Tennessee sporting event I have been to in my 30 years of life. It is. Because I wasn't at the national championship and things like that. I was young. And so as an adult, it's the best thing that has happened. And he did that. Rick did that. You can't take that away from him. And so it's just in the middle. You go, yeah, struggles in March. He does. And that's the way that it is. But also, you're not going to bite the hand that feeds you pretty well. And that's where all of that sits. It's not perfect. And, this is Tennessee sports. Do we ever think it's going to be perfect? No, that's not how this works.
You know what the worst part about this loss is that I was part of this. I wrote articles about it. I mean, I think we talked about it a lot on the podcast last week. We talked about it. We were on 104.5 The Zone with Buck Rising, and we talked about it last week. We all felt like Tennessee should have been a number 2 seed, and the national media, Joe Lunardi and others, railed against Tennessee fans. It was irrational. They had no good reason, no good logic for why Tennessee should be a 3 seed, but they went right back at Tennessee fans. And while I don't believe that a loss in the second round says a team was seeded wrong, I mean, I still think Baylor should have been a number 1 seed. Them losing to North Carolina doesn't change my opinion of that in any way. You kind of gave them a lot of ammo to go right back at Tennessee fans. And that's That's frustrating. I mean, I know that we kind of did it ourselves, and you knew it was a possibility. I mean, I didn't think Tennessee would lose, but you know that it's a possibility. But it's just one more thing that the national media has to kind of go back at Tennessee fans with. And we will hear about this a lot moving forward. A lot. It's going to be when basketball season comes around next year and Tennessee wins a few games and they lose a tough game or something. People are going to bring it up. Lenardi's going to bring it up. Dan Walken has already been firing off at Tennessee fans, and he wrote a column that, while I agreed with a large part of it, it's a lot of what we said today. His delivery was just, I think he kind of called Rick Barnes a clown show or something. Literally. In the article. Yeah, I mean, it was. Yeah. You could feel his just sort of hate of Tennessee fans coming through in that article. And it's a column. It's not a report. It's opinion. I mean, I get it. I understand what he's doing. It works. But it was definitely targeted at Tennessee fans, and he kind of sacrificed Rick Barnes to make his point.
So that's nonsense. Obviously, Dan Wolken is just a sentient garbage dump. He's a loser, and there's no bigger idiot in sports media than that absolute piece of human debris. But with that being said, it doesn't bother me as much, that particular element, because I am naturally a trash talker, I guess. I mean, we talked about it on last week's show. I antagonized Kentucky fans so much last week at the SEC tournament that one of them threw stuff at me. Okay, that's who I am. But I also said last week on the show, I was prepared for, if Tennessee blew that game, they're going to talk right back at me. And you have to be prepared for that. If you're going to come at these folks, as Tennessee fans did, and then Tennessee blows it, I mean, you just kind of have to go like, yeah, we blew it. And that is what it is. I'm not saying that they're right. In fact, I don't think they are right, because Auburn lost, and let's talk about this for a second. Auburn lost horrifically, but they deserve to be a 2 seed. Mm-hmm. That doesn't change that. Tennessee deserved to be a 2 seed.
Yeah, it doesn't change the resume.
Exactly. You can't. What happened doesn't go back in time and change the fact that Tennessee beat Arizona, beat Kentucky twice, beat Arkansas, had all of these wins.
Like St. Peter's is not. St. Peter's is a 15 seed, exactly. And as they should have been. There's nothing about their tournament resume that's like, oh, we really missed the boat. I mean, they got an automatic qualifier. Yeah, it's the only reason they're in the tournament.
Like nothing about that changes, and so that it's stupid. And they're just sticking it. They're just trying to stick it to you. That's all. We talk trash, and they're going to talk trash right back, and that's part of sports to me personally. As much as I hate those guys, and Dan Wolken is the absolute worst. But
the root, and I've said this a lot, I think we've both said it, the root of them going so hard at Tennessee fans and going back at Tennessee fans after Tennessee lost to Michigan, is the fact that Tennessee fans once again completely took over the narrative this week. They were so loud that national media had to address Tennessee being a 3 seed. I mean, what other fan base is that happening with, really? It just doesn't really happen. Like Wisconsin was a 3 seed. They didn't deserve to be a 2 seed either, but maybe there's an argument for Wisconsin to be a 2 seed over Duke as well. I mean, you didn't see social media full of Wisconsin takes this past week, or national media fans going at it with Wisconsin fans. So it's just that is why the national media does what they do with Tennessee fans, because Tennessee fans really do kind of control their own narrative in a way.
We drive a narrative, and I also think there is a fascination because of things that have unfolded in recent years. You're overturning a coaching hire and things like that. I think there's a fascination from other fan bases about what Tennessee does and this fan base. Because, yeah, we are, I think no fan base in America moves national narratives like Tennessee does. I don't, who else would it be? I mean, that is, when Tennessee does stuff, the national media all goes, we have to talk about this anytime, because they know that they'll get whatever rage or happiness interaction with Tennessee fans. And then I think that other fan bases kind of gawk at us and they go, what are Tennessee fans doing this week? And I personally, I love that. I think I know there are Tennessee fans that really don't like our reputation. I think it's amazing. I want it to continue. This fan base is so powerful and so loyal. And it makes, anytime anything good happens, it makes the good stuff so incredible and just over the top awesome. And then the pain is what it is. Again, if you're gonna be like this, you gotta expect the garbage coming back at you. So that's part of the game. But two, I don't want to let this go by because we have to revel in this too. Misery loves company. Let's be totally honest. Auburn got annihilated by Miami. Auburn have been playing some pretty poor basketball coming into this tournament. Their guard play is not good. I texted this to some friends last night. KD Johnson, their point guard. I don't know that there's a dude in college basketball who plays with more confidence and is worse than KD Johnson is. That dude thinks he's so good. You can, he makes a single shot. He'll make a play. He does every now and again. A broken clock is right twice a day. He makes a shot, and then he's walking up the floor, pounding his chest. Let's go, bah, 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 bah. And then he'll make like 4 terrible plays all in a row. And you go, what are you doing? Get in the game, focus instead of thinking about. And their guard play, it was Green. Now Green, his compatriot, that kid has been good. But he was way off last night and played terribly. He played terribly, and that whole team played terribly in the SEC tournament. Walker Kessler looked like he didn't even want to be out there. And to me, I think we can add into this conversation about Rick with this. Bruce is not a good in-game coach. I actually think Bruce Pearl is a worse in-game coach than Rick Barnes is. He never was good at Tennessee. Everybody always says, oh, he's the set out of bounds plays wizard. That's about the only thing that that Bruce is pretty good at in terms of X's and O's coaching. And he just lets his guys go out there, and the offensive strategy was just hiking up 35 footers that were contested. And I was just like, why are you not calling a timeout and drawing up plays? This is terrible. And I think his philosophy is just letting the talent be the talent, which has merit, and it can create magic like it did a few years ago, and you make a Final Four. And then it can totally fall apart and be a nightmare like it did tonight. You have arguably the best player in America in Jabari Smith. He's going to be a lottery pick, and he's so incredibly good. And he's, wasted on a second round exit because I think Bruce, he kind of has a non-interventionist policy, so to speak. He just likes to let those guys play. And the fact is, when you look at the history of college basketball, the guys who are great at X's and O's are the guys that win national championships. That is. They just are. You being a scattershot guy like that is just not the way to go. And I think you have to take it all in totality. Bruce is super fun, and he brings in incredible talent, and he does all those things, but he's not a great in-game coach. And you have to just take all of that and take it to what it is and have that whole conversation. And it goes to the same point as Rick Barnes. I think it's a somewhat similar situation, honestly.
Yeah, and I in no way want to start this just discussion really, but it is an interesting thing. Like if you were starting a college basketball team today and you had your pick of coaches, would you pick Rick Barnes or Bruce Pearl to lead your team?
Okay. It's Rick Barnes because he like I said, he's a better in-game coach, I think. But before, if this was when Rick Barnes showed up to Tennessee, it would have been Bruce easily. I think most Tennessee fans would have felt that way. Because I was skeptical specifically of Rick's recruiting ability. But the fact that recruiting ability at Tennessee, obviously he had great recruiting ability at Texas, but people were sort of like, oh, it's fallen off in recent years when he showed up at Tennessee, and we weren't really sure how he would be able to. He recruits at an incredibly high level. I believe the number 5 class in America last year or something like that. And Kennedy Chandler is incredible, and we've seen the fruits of that. And so now, knowing that Rick can be this elite recruiter that he's become, it's Rick to me. He's recruiting at essentially the same level as Bruce. Yeah, Bruce got the singular better player this year in Jabari Smith, who just turned out to be this unbelievable dude. But in totality, just the fact that Rick is just more measured and what's the right word? Cerebral as a coach, maybe more. And like I just think that I would prefer that, because it's so much more frustrating to watch what Auburn did last night than what Tennessee did. Tennessee, you're in that game right to the end. You should have won. You were probably the better team, but the shots didn't fall. Auburn just got racked. I mean, it wasn't even close. It was close for a decent chunk of that game, but ultimately, I mean, what'd they lose by? 18, I think? 18, 19, something like that?
Yeah, it really fell off there at the end.
It was, I saw something, it was either the biggest loss by a 2 seed ever, or the second biggest ever by a 2 seed. Like, just brutal. So that's a nice parallel. I didn't even think about that going in. I didn't have that thought in my head, but it actually is. That's a good kind of conversation to have. But I agree. I don't necessarily want to take it a whole lot further than that.
No, that's not a conversation. That's not the other conversation that people have had for years of wanting Bruce Pearl to come back. That's just nonsense.
Let it go.
Please,
let it go.
But yeah, I think there's enough proof at this point to firmly say that Rick Barnes is the better coach, especially when you, like you said, you combine his ability to recruit, where he has landed some really good elite 5-star players. I mean, that you can't really ask for much more when it comes to recruiting. I mean, you're going to lose some of those battles to the bigger name schools. It's inevitable, but for the most part, he's done a really good job. I'll ask you this too, because I think it's something that I think has an easy answer, but I've seen a lot of people, especially on Facebook, asking about it and talking about it. Is there any chance that Kennedy Chandler is back next season?
This was like my last topic I wanted to hit on the show. I don't think so, because he's playing at an elite level. I mean, just watch us play in that Michigan game, man. He's magic. He's so good when he's playing at the top level, at the top tier of his ability. And being able to go to the NBA, where it just becomes your full-time job, it just gives you the chance to just practice all day long and hone in your craft. I mean, there's a reason why guys, when they go to the NBA, you'll see guys who weren't excellent at the college level just shoot up out of nowhere. I think a great example is like a Josh Richardson, to use a Tennessee example. He goes to the NBA and gets a chance to make basketball his full-time job, and the dude just put his nose to the grindstone. He's become a really, really great player and a starter in the NBA. And it can just shoot you up the ladder being able to do that, and that's great. And college, you have to go to class and you got to do all the, we know how it works. But this NIL stuff is interesting. I personally, I don't think that Kennedy Chandler will be subject to this, but I hope during this offseason that we do see some players go with the NIL over the NBA. I so badly want to see that happen. Obviously, it would be unbelievable if Kennedy Chandler ended up being a guy that did that. I want it so badly. Pay this kid, please, 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 because make no mistake about it. If he came back, Tennessee will probably be preseason number 1. I mean, you will be, look how good this team was, and the only person you would lose is John Fulkerson. I mean,
yeah.
Unless, again, I guess technically Josiah Jordan-James could jump. I don't see that. Scovey could jump. I don't see that either. But, I mean, you bring him back, you're going to be one of the top teams in America. You got B.J. Edwards coming in to just bolster that backcourt. I mean, good Lord. You will have probably the best backcourt in America. I don't know who
Hatfield was playing better at the end of the year and
Huntley Hatfield coming into his own. I mean, good Lord.
It would be interesting. Like you saw Kennedy Chandler's emotion after that game, just in tears. That was a heartbreaking moment. You saw how much it meant to him. And I wondered two things. I wondered if it was the tournament run coming to an end because he really thought they could win a national championship, or if he'd already made up in his mind that he's going to the NBA and that it's over. Like it was just it hitting him that his Tennessee career was over. I don't know what it was. I think, they wouldn't let anybody ask him any questions about it, which I completely understand and respect. If you're a reporter, you got to try. But if you're Rick Barnes, you want to protect your player in that moment. And I get both sides of that. Man, if it's the first part, if it's that he really thought they could make a run, then you get some NIL money. I mean, we're seeing it's going to take millions to keep Kennedy Chandler at Tennessee next year. Like $500,000 isn't going to do it. It's going to take a pretty big deal.
So I can put a price on this. So me and some friends were talking about this last night, and unless I did not look this up myself, but a friend of mine, let me make sure exactly what he said, but I believe he said the 30th overall player last year in the draft signed a contract for $1.6 million.
Now, does the NBA contracts, we see players all the time in the NBA get drafted in that range. They usually end up, playing the G League or whatever, and they're not. Is the salary the same, or is it like, in MLB, the salaries change based on whether you're in the NBA or not?
I truly do not know.
But either way,
and I don't want to speak.
That's a good base number, though, to go off of. So you say like $2 million, is what he could go 20th or something, maybe. I mean, he's been
20 to 30 is what I've seen most of. Yeah.
So you say $2 million. You offer him $2 million to stay at Tennessee another year. Does that $2 million and the allure of winning a national championship, coming back with pretty much this whole team back, and possibly improving your draft stock to become a lottery pick and get an even bigger payday, is that enough to entice him back? I mean, it could be. I mean, the NIL stuff's a game changer. We haven't really seen how this is going to play out with college basketball players yet. So this offseason is going to be really interesting to see if it does have an impact on college basketball players.
I'm fascinated to see, and I hope so badly that it does happen, because my whole philosophy with that has always been go get your money.
Go to the NBA, without a doubt. I wouldn't blame him.
Yes, but now you can get paid at the college level.
You can get paid and possibly, like I said, possibly improve your payday in the future.
Exactly. So it's all a gamble. Every single part of this is a gamble. You can go too early and miss the boat and just end up a lifer G League player. And you could also come back next year, make that money, get injured. I mean, not to speak that into existence, but like that it happens. It absolutely happens. And then that throws a whole wrench and everything. That there's risks on both ends. And I want everybody to make the decision that is the best for them, but I really want to see that happen, where a top level player who's a projected draft pick stays for big money. Because you definitely can. I think an example of this, I don't know the full history there because I'm not going to act like I'm an Arizona fan, but I believe Mathurin at Arizona was basically good enough to go to the NBA last year, and he came back, and there's no way that kid didn't make himself massive amounts of money. I mean, if you watched that game last night against TCU, he is a monster. And he's actively in this tournament, this kid is making himself money. I mean, he's just racking up dollar bills just with each of these awesome plays that he makes.
I've always thought that was the better path for a college player. Like, I'm with you. I'd get going and making the money. If I was in that same situation, it's tough to wait a year and pass up that payday. I completely understand it. But if you're patient, in a lot of cases, these true freshmen that leave after their first year would have, greatly increased their paydays if they would have came back for just one more year. I like you said, I know there's risk, but in most instances, you're going to make more money. I get it. It's tough to pass up. I don't know that I'd be able to pass it up. If you're like, hey, you're going to be a 30th pick. Of course, we've also seen guys that thought they were going to be a first-round pick slip into the second round and maybe wish they would have come back as well.
Oh, yeah. That's happened a lot also.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a gamble on both ends.
What is the rule now on declaring? Can't you go a little bit further and still take your name out of the draft than you were able to?
So with the NIL stuff, it was previously, if you didn't sign with an agent,
I think you
could hire. Because Admiral did this. Admiral Schofield, before his senior season, he went did workouts for NBA scouts and stuff, and then decided he wanted to come back because they just didn't tell him what he wanted to hear. I don't know if it's the exact same. I need to look that up. But there is definitely a way where you can essentially go be evaluated, feel out that entire situation, and then decide if you're gonna come back. You look at the entire landscape of the NIL. I don't know that anything makes more sense than a situation like with a kid like Kennedy Chandler, because with totally fresh recruits, you have no idea what you're getting. Like Kennedy Chandler coming in last year, he's a 5-star recruit, but you have no idea if he's going to be a great player. And a giant NIL deal is a total risk. If you're going to throw like 7 figures at this guy, it is a huge gamble to just go, here's $1 million. You may totally flame out. You may be awesome. But now you've seen it. Kennedy Chandler's a dude. He's a total dude. He's going to be a great basketball player. He's already a great basketball player. And so, and he has obviously around Knoxville and with Tennessee fans, he has crazy name recognition. He's getting name recognition on a national level.
Yeah, John Morant's tweeting about him every time he plays.
Exactly. And so you start getting exposure like that. NIL deals make a whole lot more sense for a guy like that, where his profile is huge. You know he's going to be a great player. You know he's not like you have essentially certifiable proof that he's not going to be a flame out. And again, I want to see this happen so badly because I want to see how it turns out. So badly I want to see, because I think it could be awesome. It could be just a complete game changer, because there's really it's an incredible case study. The level of college basketball went down drastically when they allowed guys to leave early, because you or just skip straight to the NBA. I guess there wasn't really a time where you had to stay a certain amount of time, like baseball, because isn't baseball you have to stay 3 years or something?
Yeah.
But
If you go.
Yeah, and you can choose, because most of those guys get drafted. They have like 82 rounds in the MLB draft. Anyway,
Which that would be an interesting thing, is like if you well, I'll let you finish and I'll get to this.
Well, just if you could incentivize these guys to stay longer, because them not staying absolutely drops down the quality of college basketball. If you get a guy like Ben Mathurin at Arizona staying, you get a guy like Kennedy Chandler staying. I mean, this guy's going to be a top 5 pick, but like say Jabari Smith stayed another year. I mean, just think about that. You got NBA players playing college basketball, basically. Of course, the level of play is going to be elevated. And so I truly, as a college basketball junkie, I want to see it. I want to see it so bad, just to see what could happen and what that'll look like. And obviously, in this case, it's very selfish, because Tennessee will be an absolute powerhouse if Kennedy Chandler comes back. Make no mistake about that. They'll be. I think they're going to be one of the best teams in America anyway. But if he comes back, I mean, you're probably considered top 5 minimum, I think.
I've always thought with the NBA draft, I'm the same way. When I was growing up, you watch these great college basketball teams, and most players stayed until they were juniors, like really good players. Like I remember Vince Carter being on highlights in the 90s as a junior. I think, well, he might have went after his sophomore year, but they used to stay 2 or 3 years and leave early. There was rare that you had a player that was a freshman. Like I think Stephon Marbury was one of the first ones I remember that left after his freshman year. Then you had a handful like Kevin Garnett that would jump straight to the NBA. And I understand the argument for players should be able to do what they want to do. They shouldn't have to be forced to go play a year in college. I mean, you've seen some people try to get her, like LaMelo Ball went and played, I think, overseas for a year instead of going to college. I wouldn't mind seeing something like what MLB does, where you come straight out of high school, you enter the draft if you want to, and if you get drafted 25th, you can elect to go back to college. But if you do, you've got to stay 2 or 3 years like MLB requires. So then you've got this option where you don't force a LeBron James type talent or somebody that's just obviously NBA ready at 18 years old, which is pretty rare. I mean, that we before they changed the rules, a lot of these guys were jumping straight to the NBA and we never heard from them again. But that would allow some of those players that don't necessarily need to be playing in college where they're NBA ready to go ahead and do that. And if a team wants to take them with a top 10 pick and that guy wants to sign, that's all good and well. But if it's a little risky, you don't want to take that player that high, then okay, go back to college, but you got to stay 2 or 3 years. Like that's the drawback to pulling your name out of the draft. I mean, that maybe would be one option. I'm the same way. I wish more players did stay, but I also understand them wanting to get their money.
That makes too much sense, Zach. We can't have that around here. The NCAA can't do something like that. It'd
be good for them
logical.
though. It's really the NBA having to work with the NCAA that would have to make something happen, and I don't have a lot of faith in that happening.
No, I am, as with most things, as we've established, I'm cynical on that whole thing because there's just never going to be a day where the NCAA does what's truly right for players. It's not ever going to happen, and it would require them and the NBA to symbiotically do that. And
if they do what's right, it's not in good faith. Usually, it's probably just something that they were forced to do or perception, just like the NIL stuff.
Yeah,
much as they fought it, and they're still fighting it because they're still trying to come down on some of the stuff that's happening where they don't want schools directly involved, and they're kind of, I mean, I get it, but of course these schools are directly involved. They're going to want to know who they're signing. You can't pay a player and the school haven't be forced to take their commitment or their signature. So it's nonsense, but they want to have control.
Don't we all, but it's that is a great conversation. I hope so badly that it happens. If not with Kennedy, with just somebody, because it's just like a great experiment. I want to see how that turns out, because I think it could be really great for both parties. I genuinely do.
Chandler would be one of the rare. I mean, he'd be more popular than Hendon Hooker or any Tennessee football player.
Yeah, right now, just because the basketball team is so much better, playing in a, they're a championship team. I mean, that's the bottom line. When's the last time Tennessee football won a championship? 98, unfortunately. So that's he would be. I mean, he's that guy. I went to some Tennessee merch stores after this champion just to look at what everybody had. And there's Kennedy merch with his face on it everywhere in all of those places already. And he's just that guy. He would be incredibly marketable. So I would love to see that happen. But personally, I interpret what happened at the end of that game as he's already made up his mind, and it's the end, and he was sad that's how it was gonna end. That's how I interpret it. Again, I'm projecting that onto him. Maybe he does. Maybe it affects him so deeply that he decides to come back. That's kind of like with Fulkerson last year, right? He didn't want that to be the way that he went out and utilized that 93rd year that he was able to get somehow. And
to be fair, Fulkerson wasn't staring down a multi-million-dollar payday either.
That's true.
He's gonna have to go get a real job if he leaves.
Yeah, he'll be all right though. Yeah, he's got plenty. He's a legend around these parts now, so that shouldn't be a problem. But we covered most bases. I think we're edging on going long here, although we did almost 90 minutes last week, so who really cares? But just trying to think. We would be remiss if we didn't mention this. This can be short. Kentucky lost to St. Peter's. No. We got to throw that in there. I had a field day.
That was the best moment of the weekend, really.
Oh yeah. Well, that beat down Longwood was really fun, but
yeah, that's true. But the weekend, really, did you feel like there was some lackluster games? Like we didn't really have that many buzzer beater type moments. It kind of, I want to say a letdown, but there wasn't as many great moments as I was hoping for.
That game with Arizona and TCU last night might have been it. That might have been the best game of the weekend. Although, really, that game between Kentucky and St. Peter's, I mean, you went to overtime, huge shots. What's Doug Edert?
Yes.
That guy, the hero that America needed, Doug Edert, stepping up, hitting those big shots. I loved after the game. He's there. I don't know if you watched his interview after that game. The school is in New Jersey, I believe. and they interviewed him, and he has like this super thick New Jersey accent. Was just like, I just went out and made the shots. He's just trying to, do what's best for my team. Like I loved it, and he has that mustache. Doug, proud of you, Doug.
That's a perfect name for him too. Yeah,
Yeah,
Doug.
man. it's a great story. But so I had a field day after that because everybody, if you listen to this show, you got to listen to Kentucky sports radio after something devastating happens to Kentucky. I mean, it's high comedy. And this was, so they lost to Tennessee in the SEC tournament, and I listened to that show. And they were not happy, but we talked about it last week. They've kind of come to a point where they're like, Tennessee is kind of better than us now. Or not, if not better than us, they just totally have our number. Like they've just kind of consigned themselves to that, and that's amazing. But in this case, it was DEFCON 1 meltdown mode, baby. They were taught Calipari's fired. What do we do? Calipari runs antiquated offense, which is true, by the way. I fit him kind of into that same category of like amazing recruiter, not a great coach. And so he's in it pretty bad. They're not going to fire him. He has literally, I believe, a lifetime contract. But they were essentially saying it's the worst loss in Kentucky basketball history. It was like a consensus where it was just like the spot that it happened in, the way that you lost, how humiliating it was. And we got to live through that. And that was fun. It was a highlight of the weekend. I can't lie.
There was lackluster games, but like you said, there were a few great moments with the Kentucky game, the Arizona game, the Gonzaga game. Did you see the post game interview with was it Drew Timmy?
I did not.
He was basically censoring himself. It's fantastic. You have to go look up that interview. If you're listening, you need to look it up. They asked him what he said in the locker room, and you can see him pausing whenever there was like a expletive that was uttered in the locker room, and he paused and thought of what word to replace it with. It's tremendous. It's almost like a little bit that somebody was doing.
Drew Timmy, Gonzaga plays on the West Coast, and so I feel like a lot of Tennessee fans probably don't like watch them play a lot. They just sort of know that Gonzaga is good. If you don't know the lore there, he is kind of their John Fulkerson, and he's basically if John Fulkerson was an All-American, like a full-blown, like one of the best players in America. He scored what he scored in that game, like 35 points or something.
Yeah, he was
went off. Was unstoppable. He's also 7 feet tall. He's a monster. But their whole deal, they're my team kind of from here on out. I think first of all, they're playing Duke, and
they're fun to watch.
Through Duke, I believe that's right. They're Duke's their next game, I think. If I'm make sure I don't misspeak there. But no, they're playing Arkansas. Sorry, who's Duke playing? No, what am I? Hold on, this is Michigan. Yeah, they are. Sorry, I misspoke there. Duke is playing Texas Tech. Sorry, I got crossed there. I went on a trip this weekend. People might have seen on my Instagram, I was at Jack Daniel's Distillery on Sunday, drinking my sorrows away as much as they would let me. It is a dry county, but Gonzaga, just their whole setup. I love Mark Few, everything that they do. If you want to have that conversation we were having earlier, like my ideal coach would be Mark Few, man. I just love his whole philosophy, the way that he operates. So they're my boys. Go Bulldogs.
Oh, it's easier when you got a player like Chet Holmgren, though, that's 7'1" and can bring the ball up the court, and just, I don't know, there's a more versatile player in college basketball than him.
Well, I said who has more gaudy stats and less body mass than Chet Holmgren. He's
7'1", and Jarnell Stokes probably outweighed him by 150 pounds.
But he doesn't get pushed around. That's the craziest part. I don't like his game. To me, he's an incredible like finesse player, and he's so lengthy. He looks like a praying mantis out there.
Mm-hmm.
He can be anywhere, get any rebound. That's good luck with anybody that has to play them down low. Memphis, as much as I hate them, gave an admirable effort.
Yeah, they really did.
But they're going to be one to contend with. I think they're going to beat Arkansas. And also, at this point, go Villanova, because I'm too bitter. I got to see Michigan lose. Maybe one day we'll get there. Well, Zach, anything else for the good folks at home? I think this might be it. Let's do say here. We're gonna take a turn into football. I know that's obviously going to be a huge topic here with spring ball coming up. So we haven't forgotten about it. It's coming up. You got to give this its due. Tennessee in this NCAA tournament, it's ended sooner than we thought. So we'll get to turn our attention to spring ball a little more than we probably were hoping. Even I wish we could have talked about Tennessee basketball longer. And then baseball, we again gotta mention, just smashed South Carolina over the weekend. Wasn't even close. None of those games. South Carolina, I don't think ever had a lead on Tennessee even. In those games, they swept them and they won the final game of the sweep by 10. And the Vitello put in Ben Joyce.
I loved your tweet.
He put in Ben Joyce when they were already up by 10 runs in the final inning of that game. And he threw 103-mile-an-hour fastballs right down the pipe, and they were already up by 10. That's pretty cold.
Speaking of NIL deals, I know Tennessee has more important players and maybe better all-around players, but Ben Joyce has become, on a national level, the most recognizable player on Tennessee's baseball team. Talked about this before. Open social media this morning, I saw several Ben Joyce tweets from national accounts. I see things. I follow a bunch of baseball accounts on Instagram, and I see stuff on there all the time too. He could get an NIL deal being a relief pitcher for Tennessee. If Tennessee baseball players are getting that much attention, just think about, football and basketball and where all of that's going to go from here.
Mm-hmm. The volunteer fireman, as he's been dubbed, Ben Joyce. I'm excited. I haven't been to a game yet. Personally, I'm going to turn my attention to that, because when it's spring, you go sit in the stadium for a few hours, watch some baseball, grab a beer, dude. I don't know if there's anything better in sports than that. So, not to be like a salesman on Tennessee's behalf, but it is a whole lot of fun.
And with Tennessee football, spring practice starting Tuesday, you know how spring practice goes. There's a lot of this guy standing out, that guy standing out, or it's a lot of assumptions made early in the spring that don't really mean a whole lot. We don't tend to learn a whole lot about a team in the spring, but it's still fun to see what storylines develop. You just hope for Tennessee's sake they get through spring unscathed. Don't lose anybody. God, don't let anything happen to Hendon Hooker, because
please,
Joe Milton,
protect him at all costs.
Real briefly, I mentioned a few players this morning that in an article that really need to have a good spring practice for Tennessee to win 10 games in 2022. I actually feel like Joe Milton's one of those players, because how often does a starting quarterback go through the whole season and not miss a snap at the college level? Like, it just doesn't happen. Even if it's a handful of series, we saw it last year with the Ole Miss game. Joe Milton came in at the end and ran out of bounds to end the game. Or if it's a spot start where, hey, Tennessee's playing Missouri this week, and this is a game that Tennessee's much better than Missouri, but they need, Hendon Hooker's banged up. They need adequate play from the backup quarterback. It's the true freshman Taven Jackson, which is a complete unknown, or it's Joe Milton, who's got a lot of upside, but just hasn't been consistent. Like, you need to be able to count on Joe Milton to come in and win you a tough game if you have to. And that could be the difference in a 9 or 10 win season.
Absolutely. Well said. And we'll talk about all of that, because there's plenty to say. I actually went on a show a couple of weeks ago and was kind of doing position breakdowns for Tennessee. And there's plenty to talk about. I would put it that way, to just give everybody a preview. Plenty to talk about at all different positions, and kind of where Heupel's head is at with specifically the the defense. I mean, I think we all realize that's the piece that needs the most improvement and where they could kind of go from there. So we'll have those discussions coming up. And otherwise, I think, and we will say this, Nico Iamaleava. You wrote some stuff this week. He is apparently moving up his commitment. We thought it was going to be in May. Now it sounds like it may be next month in April. And Tennessee,
there's some people that think
favorite.
Yeah, there's some people that think he could pop off at any time too this week. I mean, I've seen a lot of speculation out there. Recruiting is fluid, and if anybody tells you that they know what a recruit is going to do, they're pretty much full of it, because we've seen a lot of really well-connected recruiting guys get burned on stuff. I mean, they can change hour to hour. So we'll see what happens, but yeah, probably in April. Could happen this week, maybe next week. We're talking about Nico being committed to Tennessee, but at this point, if he does not commit to Tennessee, it's going to be a full meltdown on Vol Twitter. So just let's hope that doesn't happen for a lot of reasons.
I mean, whatever happened on that visit, whether it was just a great visit and he loves it, or this whole $8 million contract thing is actually true, whatever it might be.
Nico has just committed to Tennessee as we are on the air, as we're recording this.
Don't make this up, dude. Are you serious?
I'm not. I don't know how to get that on camera here. Can you see that? GoVols 24/7 here.
What timing was that, man?
Wow.
What kind of timing? We did that on purpose. Okay, I'll admit, we knew that this was coming.
That was a setup. I mean, we waited till the very end, until it was a setup. We knew.
Wow, that is real. Look at that.
Thank God you did not wait 2 more minutes, Nico.
Literally, I was about to end the show. That is amazing. Now, I mean, what a pickup.
Yeah, I mean that is
for a second here.
That is, we've said for a while that to win a championship in college football, to make an SEC championship run, you have to have a transcendent quarterback. Unless you're Georgia, that just had this ungodly defense full of 5-star players this past year, and they managed to win with Stetson Bennett. You need a transcendent quarterback like Alabama's had many times, like Clemson had with Trevor Lawrence. I mean, it's just, it's what you have to have. It's a quarterback-driven sport. I mean, from the NFL to college football. And there's no one player that you can land that can have an impact on a team like a quarterback. And there's some people that think Nico is better than Arch Manning. Like, Arch Manning gets the name recognition as being the 5-star quarterback, and he's ranked higher. But if you took the names away, Nico is right there where he's a little more fluid. There's nothing wrong with Arch Manning's game, but there's just some that think that Nico might be a little more talented. That if his name was different, that he would be the top-ranked quarterback in the country right now.
I'll say this about him. I think he fits this system at Tennessee better than Arch Manning does. Whoever you think is the quote-unquote better guy, I think his style of play, it makes the most sense to me that they went so heavily at Nico.
Well, it was very smart, I think, on Heupel's end and the whole Tennessee staff, because they never tried to get in that Arch Manning thing. Clearly, it wasn't that they didn't think they could get Arch Manning, because Nico is in that same caliber. But they chose Nico, basically. Like, they went after him specifically, and they never even tried to get involved with Arch Manning. Now, you can say that Arch Manning wasn't going to consider Tennessee to begin with, but I don't know if that's necessarily true, because he's got Florida on his list all of a sudden, and that's a coach that hasn't really proved anything. We really don't know what the offense is going to look like at Florida next year. He's in with Steve Sarkisian at Texas, who might not even make it past his second year if he doesn't improve. I think Tennessee could have got like a visit out of Arch if they would have strongly pursued him, but they made their choice. They went all in on Nico, and I think that's obviously a big reason why Tennessee was able to get him. If there's some NIL stuff as well, that obviously plays a factor. But you were going to have to do that at this point with any quarterback. You had to do it to keep Hendon Hooker in Knoxville. But they weren't like the other SEC teams. They went all in on Nico, and I think that meant a lot to him.
So let's just hit some of the high points. This is from 247. I don't know if they had the exclusive, if they didn't, and it was Vol Quest. I don't know. Forgive me. This is all.
He tweeted. He did tweet. He tweeted
it.
But I think they might have knew.
I mean, I will. Yeah, I'll say this: they had everything prepared. Clearly, they have whole stories already up, like the second that this was announced. So, I think this was already kind of in the works. Probably why. I mean, you saw in the last week all of those guys making predictions for Tennessee to land him as a recruit. But he said they had everything that I was looking for. Iamaleava told 247 Sports, I met some incredible people. Not just with the football program, but everyone we met was so welcoming to us and made me feel like home. I mean, we said that when we were talking about his visit. We did a whole segment on it on this show. I don't know how you could have had, outside of this whole NIL talk and the potential of whatever happened there. I mean, he couldn't have had a more perfect visit. And we said, like, you created such a special moment at the basketball game where they were chanting his name and he said his mom cried and all of this stuff where you just made this visit so good, and they did such a great job when they had him here. And then maybe the NIL was just the thing that took it over the top. If it happened, we got to caveat that if whatever happened there. And so let's say this: congratulations to everybody involved there. Obviously, you got to get him locked down. You got to get him under on the dotted line, and these kids can change their minds at any time. But assuming that he stays with Tennessee, what a building block this is for a recruiting class. We've already said it plenty, and this is why it's so important to get this guy, a super high profile, highly sought after quarterback. You get him in the fold, and then you can essentially, for lack of a better word, use him to say to other guys, hey, we got him. Why don't you come play with him? To a wide receiver, say he's going to be throwing you the ball, and you know how good he is. You've seen him, haven't you? And he's going to be getting you the ball on, three times on every single drive. We're going to get you huge numbers. He's going to get huge numbers, and then we're going to go win a national championship. I mean, the things that you can sell just off of having this guy in the fold is massive. I don't think that you could say that enough, just how, honestly, this is so huge. I can't believe the timing on this. This is ridiculous that we were able to fit this in. Clearly, we are not in the know recruiting fold as far as this stuff goes. Wow.
It erases.
Congrats to everybody.
Well, it
high fives all around.
It answers a lot of questions about Josh Heupel. Yeah, obviously he can recruit. Tennessee has not won a recruiting battle like this in a long time. I mean, they haven't had a 5-star quarterback in 20 some years. It's monumental, really, for the program. I don't think you can understate how important this is for all the reasons you said. I mean, it's going to lead. It legitimizes Tennessee football. It says to other 5-star recruits, 4-star recruits, like, hey, that guy's going there. I want to be a part of that. I could go to Alabama and it'll turn out well, but I'm going to have a lot more competition there. I can go with this guy, and I'm going to have the quarterback I need to excel. It's absolutely massive for the program. I don't know what it'll directly lead to as far as the next couple of years for Tennessee football, but just in general, I think this could be what kind of turns the tide in the program to take them over the hump to competing with Georgia in the SEC East, like this moment right here. And the good news, when you were talking about you got to sign the guy, that is true. You have to do that. It never stops. You got to recruit him all the way through college now because of the transfer portal. But he's going to be your guy, and we don't usually see a lot of quarterbacks decommit. Quarterbacks like to get locked in early. They want their spot. You see them commit this time of year a lot. That's why it's kind of surprising that Arch Manning is waiting so long, and it really helped Tennessee in this process because it shifted Alabama and Georgia's focus to him, and left Nico there for Tennessee, who Ole Miss was also after Miami and Oregon. So it wasn't just Alabama and Georgia. They beat out some other top tier programs. They beat out Lane Kiffin because Lane Kiffin also badly wanted Nico.
So I'm looking now. He posted a video on Instagram that was produced. I don't know if Tennessee produced this for him. I feel like there's a pretty decent chance that that's the case, because Tennessee has an incredible video team. And it is a video with his mom, and it literally has in it the "We Want Nico" chant at the basketball game. It's him and his mom, and then they show the video of it. I don't want to say that I feel. I love when I make a point on this show and I'm like super right. I just look. I wouldn't do this if I didn't like hear the dumb sound of my own voice, okay? But I do have to point out, last week on this show, or whenever it was, 2 weeks ago, I made the point that was such a huge moment. You cannot create that where it's this organic, like, powerful moment where the fans do something like this. And as I said, you can't recreate like his mother's emotions of just having this special moment of like, this is incredible. And now she's in that video and they're talking about, I killed our graphics. Whoop. There we go. Go to youtube.com to see what just happened. But I don't know what the right word is. The usefulness, the power, that's the right word. The power of a moment like that in recruiting is so huge, and you see it right there. It's in the video.
Yeah.
I mean, put it in the video. Like,
that's something that other programs want to replicate, and
exactly.
Nothing about that was fabricated on Tennessee's end.
Not everybody
organic.
can do that.
No.
Like Tennessee can do that with this crazy, unbelievable fan base that Tennessee has. You can create that moment, and not everybody can do that. That's a special thing. And wow, let's not say that Tennessee fans did the whole thing in getting him locked in, but I think clearly that was a huge factor. Obviously,
I think it played a big part in it for sure. It definitely set. I think Oregon was a real threat. I think Miami was on the verge of becoming a real threat because Mario Cristobal is a very good recruiter, and he's going to get a lot of good players down there. But I think, all things considered, that had a lot to do with it because, Oregon, the NIL stuff we talked about playing a factor. But I think you kind of have to look at that as like, you got to do your part. You got to make the offer. It's got to be a good offer because the other school's going to make a good offer. And Oregon with Nike money is going to make a pretty good offer too.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't look at it, like, you have to do the NIL stuff, but I don't know how much that's going to tip the scales in recruitments moving forward, because I think it's just something you have to do. That's why I think that weekend and Tennessee fans really, I can't think of a recruitment that they played a bigger part in than Nico's.
That's huge. Well, incredible stuff. Caught us completely off guard.
Yeah, that's
but unbelievable timing. Shout out to Nico. For he knew that we were doing this, and he said, I'm gonna make sure that I do it before they're done recording. We appreciate that. We talked to him beforehand. I'll pull back the curtain a little bit. We talked to him beforehand. No.
You're talking about an organic reaction. That was
as organic as it gets. That's real. I literally thought you were like joking. Like, I thought you were making.
I wouldn't do that to you here.
Because you literally said, "Oh, well, it seems like at any time." There are some people that think that it could drop at any time. Clearly, that was the case at on a Monday. So there you go. I think that's the show. I'm Charlie Burris. That is Zach Ragan. We've laid it all out there for you today. Blood, sweat, and unfortunately, because of Tennessee sports, tears. At Charlie_Burris, at Zach TNT on Twitter, at A to Z Sports, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook.com/A to Z Sports. Nashville, A to Z Sports / A to Z Sports Nashville, and A to Z Sports.com for everything that Zach and I write. And then YouTube.com, type in A to Z Sports there in the search bar on YouTube and subscribe to the YouTube channel to see us and all the other shows on the network. I think that is all. Whew, this was a long one, Zach, but a good one. We got it.
Yep.
We fit everything in the show. That's great. And with that said, we'll talk to y'all next week.
See you guys later.